In November 1969, Baltimore lost more than a young nun. It lost its innocence. Sister Cathy Cesnik, beloved teacher, quiet soul, and protector of her students, vanished without a trace. No witnesses, no leads, no struggle, just an empty car and a city drowning in questions. But as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something far more sinister than a missing persons case. Students whispered about a secret they were too terrified to repeat. Priests moved like shadows behind closed doors, and every clue pointed toward an institution powerful enough to silence victims and bury the truth for decades. The closer you get to Sister Cathy's story, the darker the world becomes. This isn't just a murder mystery. This is a cover-up wrapped in fear, protected by faith, and paid for in blood. Welcome to the case the church never wanted you to hear. This is Shadow Tales. Baltimore, November 7th, 1969. The air was cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of rain-soaked pavement when Sister Cathy Cesnik, a 26-year-old Catholic nun and beloved teacher at Archbishop Kioff High School, stepped out of her apartment for what should have been a simple errand. She told her roommate she'd be back shortly. She never returned. This is where the mystery begins. Not with a crime scene, not with a body, but with a sudden vanishing, wrapped in silence and shadow. Sister Cathy was known for her kindness, her warmth, and her unusual ability to listen. Former students described her as someone who made you feel safe in a place that, for many girls, was anything but. Her disappearance wasn't just unexpected. It was impossible. She lived in a quiet neighborhood. She had no known enemies. She was a nun, a figure of innocence, devotion, and purity. But what investigators didn't know, what the public didn't know, was that Sister Cathy suspected something dark was happening inside the walls of the school where she worked, and some say that secret is what killed her. When police arrived at the apartment, they found no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no loud noises reported by neighbors. It was as if she had simply stepped off the face of the earth. But the first crack in the case appeared the next morning. Her car. It was found illegally parked just a few blocks away. Not where she left it, not in a place she would have gone, and certainly not by accident. Inside the car, investigators found something chilling. The passenger seat was pushed all the way back, too far back for Cathy's height, almost like someone much taller had been sitting there. In the weeks that followed, Baltimore police insisted they were actively investigating. But the truth is, nothing happened. No leads, no suspects, no progress. It was as if the city wanted her disappearance to fade into silence. But Sister Cathy's family and former students refused to let her go. They searched fields, alleys, abandoned warehouses, wooded areas, anywhere a body could be hidden. Still nothing. Until 2 months later, January 1970, a man hiking in a remote wooded area of Lansdowne discovered what looked like a piece of clothing peeking through the dirt and leaves. When he moved the debris aside, he found something else. A body, face down, partially buried. It was Sister Cathy. The medical examiner reported blunt force trauma to the head, a violent, personal, intentional killing. But here's where the case shifted from tragic to sinister. Because the moment Sister Cathy's identity was confirmed, the local authorities seemed to lose interest, almost immediately. Why? Why would the murder of a promising, innocent nun in a Catholic school system be met with silence? Why did no major suspects emerge? And why did everyone connected to the case, teachers, priests, counselors, suddenly begin avoiding questions? It wouldn't be until decades later that the truth would begin to surface, a truth darker than anyone imagined, one that reached deep into the heart of the Catholic Church and revealed a secret Sister Cathy may have died protecting. Was she murdered because of what she knew, or because of what she was about to expose? This is where the investigation truly begins. In the decades following Sister Cathy's murder, Baltimore moved on. But the girls of Archbishop Kioff High School did not. They carried something with them, something they had buried so deep that even they avoided looking at it. Trauma has a way of folding itself into the corners of memory, quiet and patient, until one day something forces it back into the light. And for these women, that day came when Sister Cathy's case resurfaced. It began with a whisper, a conversation between two former students, Jean Hargadon Weiner and Teresa Lancaster. Both were adults now, living miles away from the world they had tried to escape. But when Sister Cathy's name came up, both women froze. They shared a secret, and it was the same one. Back in the late 1960s, Archbishop Cathy wasn't just a school. It was a fortress, a heavily controlled environment run by strict Catholic leadership. And the charismatic, well-loved priest in charge, Father Joseph Maskell, was treated like royalty. But behind closed doors, he was a monster. According to the survivors, Maskell didn't act alone. He brought in police officers, doctors, and men of influence. He used the church as a shield and the girls as prey. Jean described it years later with a trembling voice. He said, "God wanted me to obey. He said I was chosen." Maskell used religion as a weapon, authority as a leash, shame as a gag. And for the girls he targeted, the school became a living nightmare, but one woman tried to save them, Sister Cathy. Jean revealed something that shook investigators to their core. Months before her disappearance, Sister Cathy pulled her aside after class. She looked nervous, terrified, but determined. She asked Jean one question: "Is someone hurting you?" For the first time in years, Jean felt safe enough to tell the truth. Cathy didn't look shocked or confused. She looked angry. Something inside her had already suspected exactly what was happening. Sister Cathy made a promise that day. "I'm going to help you. I won't let this continue." That promise may have been her death sentence. Because the moment Sister Cathy began asking questions, men with something to lose began watching her. Survivors later testified that Maskell seemed agitated, pacing the halls, snapping at students. One girl even reported seeing him in the faculty parking lot, slamming papers into his car and muttering, "She knows. Cathy knows." And then, just days later, Sister Cathy disappeared. But here is where the chapter grows darker. Jean claimed that Maskell took her in a car, drove her to a wooded area, and forced her to look at something she never forgot: Sister Cathy's woody. The location matched where Cathy was eventually found. He said, "See what happens when you say things you're not supposed to say." Whether Maskell showed her the real body or staged the scene is still debated, but the trauma Jean carried was real. The fear was real, the message was real, and the timing, chillingly precise. Maskell wasn't just abusing girls, he was silencing them. For decades, these women stayed quiet, terrified, ashamed, convinced no one would believe them. And for decades, the church stayed quiet too. But time doesn't erase truth. It only buries it. And now, after 45 years, the survivors were ready to dig. Their testimony would become the backbone of a movement, and the fuel behind reopening Sister Cathy's cold case. But as they spoke out, they uncovered something far more sinister: a network of men who protected Maskell, a system built on silence, a church that refused to answer questions. And at the center of it all, the murder of a nun who tried to save them. Baltimore in the late 1960s was a city wrapped tightly in the arms of authority. Police, church, and politics, all woven together like threads of the same fabric. But beneath that neat exterior was something rotting, something no one dared to look at too closely, until Sister Cathy disappeared. And suddenly, everything pointed toward the same place: Archbishop Cathy High School, and the man who controlled it, Father Joseph Maskell, the man no one questioned. Maskell wasn't an ordinary priest. He was connected. He served as counselor to the students, advisor to the archbishop, trusted by police officers, close friends with local politicians. He even had an office inside a police station, an unusual privilege for a Catholic priest. To the outside world, he was respected. To the girls of Cathy, he was the nightmare in the hallways. But when survivors came forward decades later, something strange happened. Every one of their stories placed Maskell at the center of a system designed to protect him, not just protect him, shield him. When Sister Cathy vanished, law enforcement reacted in a way that raised more questions than answers. Witnesses reported seeing unknown cars circling her apartment. Neighbors heard arguments days before she disappeared. And Maskell was known to have visited her frequently. But police never questioned him seriously. Officers who were close to Maskell, and there were many, dismissed survivor testimonies. Some refused to file reports, others lost documents. A few even threatened victims, warning them to stay quiet or cause trouble for the church. The survivors described a sense of hopelessness. It wasn't just that no one believed us, Jean said. It was that no one wanted to. What the survivors didn't know at the time was that Maskell had built a protective circle around himself, high-ranking clergy, Baltimore police office, is medical professionals, politically connected friends. Several survivors claimed that these men were allowed into the school after hours, sometimes to assist Maskell in his abuse. It created an invisible fortress. When complaints were filed, they were routed to church officials, not the police. When girls tried to tell someone, they were threatened. When rumors spread through the school, staff members were reassigned or silenced. Maskell even kept drawers full of girls' personal items, underwear, photos, letters, trophies of his control. The church later called them counseling tools. The survivors called them what they truly were, evidence. For years, Maskell operated untouched. Then Sister Cathy began asking questions. She wasn't loud about it. She wasn't dramatic. She was simply listening. Something no one else had tried to do. And as the girls opened up to her, Cathy pieced together the truth Maskell worked so hard to bury. Multiple survivors remember the same moment. Maskell pacing, sweating, muttering angrily. "She knows," he said. "Sister Cathy knows." That's when Maskell's behavior shifted. He stopped hiding his fear, stopped pretending he was untouchable. Instead, he acted like a man backed into a corner. And days later, Cathy Castle vanished. When Cathy's body was discovered, the church made one unusual move. They transferred Maskell to another parish. Not suspended, not questioned, not disciplined. Transferred. The police barely investigated him. The church protected him. His friends in law enforcement fought to keep the case quiet. It was a conspiracy built not on complexity, but on simplicity. Too many powerful people had too much to lose if the truth surfaced. Maskell knew it. The church knew it. And decades later, the investigators of the Keepers knew it too. But knowing the truth and proving it are two different things. And if Maskell had buried this secret for 45 years, what else could he be hiding? On January 3rd, 1970, nearly 2 months after Sister Cathy Cesnik vanished, a man walking his dog through a snow-covered patch of Lansdowne, Maryland, stumbled upon something frozen beneath the winter frost. A body. A woman's body. The crime scene was silent. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no tire tracks that could survive 2 months of wind and snow. Whoever dumped her there knew the land, knew the season, and knew that nature would erase the evidence long before police ever found her. When detectives arrived, they quickly realized this was no random crime. This was no robbery gone wrong. This was personal. The injuries no one could explain. Sister Cathy's body was badly decomposed, but a few disturbing details stood out. A blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Clothing arranged in a deliberate manner. No signs of sexual assault at the time of death. No defensive wounds, meaning she likely knew her killer, or feared him enough not to fight. The medical examiner estimated she died the night she disappeared. But the strange part? There were no animal marks on her body. In a remote wooded area in the dead of winter, that meant one thing. Someone had come back. Someone had maintained the site. Someone had checked on the body. Who and why? Detectives quietly asked themselves the same chilling question survivors had whispered for decades. Was Sister Cathy killed to silence her? The place where Cathy was found, near a garbage dump off Monumental Avenue, wasn't chosen randomly. It was secluded, known mostly to locals, used often by police officers for target practice and off-duty hangouts. And who spent long hours with police officers? Who had friends in the department? Who had access to patrol routes? Father Joseph Maskell. To the public, he was a respected priest, but to the girls of Keogh High School, he was the man Cathy was trying to protect them from. So the theory grew louder. If Cathy knew about the abuse at Keogh, if she confronted Maskell, if she threatened to expose him, then this quiet patch of forest was not just a dumping ground. It was a message. Decades later, a survivor named Jean Vayner came forward with a horrifying claim. She said Maskell took her to see Cathy's body shortly after the murder, before the remains were found by police. Jean described details only someone who had seen the scene firsthand would know. The frozen earth, Cathy's position on the ground, the location of the brush around her. Investigators were stunned. How could she possibly know these details if she weren't telling the truth? Jean said. Maskell leaned close to her and whispered, "This is what happens when you say bad things about people." It wasn't just intimidation. It was a confession wrapped in a threat, but at the time, Jean was a child. Her story was dismissed, ignored, silenced, just like Cathy had been. A crime scene with no answers, but one clear signature. After months of forensic work, police were left with nothing but a list of suspicions that pointed in one direction. No robbery, no ransom, no random attacker, no signs of stranger violence, no evidence left behind, and a body left in a place connected to Maskell's circle. Everything about the crime screamed. This was an inside job. Someone Cathy knew, someone Cathy trusted, someone Cathy feared. Police eventually declared the case cold. The church made no effort to push for answers. Maskell was quietly relocated. Cathy's students were told to move on, and Baltimore returned to normal. But her former students didn't forget. They couldn't. And decades later, they came back with questions the church and the police had run from for years. For more than 3 decades, the halls of Archbishop Keough High School held a secret so heavy, so horrifying, that the girls who survived it could barely speak the words aloud. But trauma has a strange way of waiting. It doesn't disappear. It sits quietly in the back of the mind, like a locked room that refuses to stay closed. In the 90s, that locked room finally burst open. This is when 2 former Keough students, now adult women, stepped into the light with a truth that would shake the foundations of Baltimore's Catholic community. They were called Jane Doe and Jane Roe. And what they revealed was a nightmare no one wanted to believe. He said God wanted this. Their testimonies were nearly identical. Behind closed doors, Father Joseph Maskell didn't act like a priest. He acted like a predator. He used religion as a weapon. They described repeated sexual abuse, psychological manipulation, threats of damnation, the involvement of other men in positions of power, being forced into silence under the guise of spiritual counseling. Maskell used confessionals as traps, blessings as control, faith as a leash. The institution designed to protect them had become their prison. What made their stories even more disturbing was a shared detail. Maskell constantly worried about people talking, and one name came up every time: Sister Cathy Cesnik. As more survivors began to speak, pieces of the puzzle slid into place. These women claimed Sister Cathy learned what Maskell was doing to the girls. Not just rumors, but actual testimonies from students she trusted. Cathy didn't turn away. She tried to help them. She confronted Maskell. She considered reporting him to the police. And shortly after, she vanished. Decades later, her former students were certain this was not a coincidence. It was a warning, a silencing, a message to anyone who dared expose the truth. But they weren't children anymore. They weren't afraid. Not anymore. Among the survivors, one woman came forward with a story that investigators had once dismissed: Jean Vayner. Jean recalled traumatic memories in vivid detail, memories she had buried deep inside for survival. She remembered the manipulation, the threats, Maskell's panic, his desperate attempts to keep the girls quiet, and the horrifying moment she believed he showed her Cathy's dead body. Her testimony was met with disbelief when she first told police in the 90s. But now there were dozens more survivors backing her, dozens of girls who lived the same horror. Their voices combined into something unstoppable, a force more powerful than fear. Baltimore couldn't ignore it anymore. With the allegations gaining attention, reporters, investigators, and documentary filmmakers began digging. They uncovered police files that mysteriously went missing, archdiocese documents sealed away, witnesses who suddenly didn't recall, and a pattern of priest relocations that mirrored other abuse scandals nationwide. It became clear. This wasn't just a crime, it was a cover-up, a systematic protection of predators at the expense of children. The survivors' voices were no longer whispers in the dark. They were echoes that spread through Baltimore, demanding justice. But one question haunted them all. If Maskell really did kill Sister Cathy, if the church really did hide the truth, if the police really looked the other way, why hadn't anyone been held accountable? And more importantly, how far would the cover-up go to keep those answers buried? Every survivor told investigators a similar story. Whenever a girl reported Father Joseph Maskell's abuse, the same thing happened. She was sent to counseling. Maskell himself handled the counseling. Parents were never informed. Records suspiciously disappeared. Other priests claimed they knew nothing. For decades, this system protected Maskell, not the children. But when survivors started filing civil suits in the 90s, the archdiocese was forced to respond. Their statements were always the same. We were unaware. We have no documentation. We cannot confirm. But documents did exist, and many had mysteriously vanished. Key police files went missing. Reports couldn't be located. Witnesses couldn't remember. Too many disappearances to be chance. When Maskell was finally confronted by authorities in the 90s, he denied everything. He was calm, charming, confident. But buried in his office at Keogh High School, investigators discovered something chilling. Boxes filled with confidential student records, private journals, personal letters, intimate details Maskell had no right to possess. It looked less like counseling and more like leverage. It was clear Maskell wasn't just abusing girls. He was monitoring them, studying them, keeping tabs on anyone who might expose him. And then, a police discovery changed everything. DNA taken from the crime scene did not match Maskell. The church pointed to this as proof of innocence, but investigators knew better. Maskell didn't have to kill Sister Cathy directly. He only had to fear what she knew. And the people Maskell associated with? Some of them were men with power, connections, and reasons to stay hidden. Sister Cathy stood in their way. Sister Cathy's body was found in January 1970, months after she disappeared. The cause of death: a blow to the skull. No signs of robbery, no signs of struggle. Nothing stolen. This was not random. This was deliberate. Investigators now believe the motive wasn't personal. It was protective. Sister Cathy threatened to expose a network of abuse. And in 1969, that was enough to get a woman killed. Today, no one has been charged with Sister Cathy's murder. Maskell died in 2001, never confessing, but never cleared. The archdiocese quietly paid settlements to victims. More survivors came forward each year, and the same question still haunts Baltimore. How many people knew, and how many stayed silent? When Netflix released The Keepers, a new generation learned what had been hidden for half a century. People began asking, why did the police ignore witnesses? Why were church files sealed? Why did Maskell escape justice? And why did Sister Cathy have to die? The documentary didn't close the case. It reopened it. Her former students still visit her grave, still fight for answers, still demand justice. Because Sister Cathy wasn't just a victim. She was the first person who listened, the first person who believed the girls, the first person who tried to protect them. Her courage cost her life. But it also sparked a movement that refuses to let her story fade. The church hid it. The city ignored it. But Sister Cathy's voice never died, because every survivor she tried to protect became the voice she never got to use. If you believe the truth should never stay buried, subscribe to Shadow Tales and join us as we continue digging into the stories they tried to silence.